I'm Benjamin Hall, and I'm searching for heroes. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. I'm Benjamin Hall, and this is Searching for Heroes. As you will know, our theme this month has been rebirth. The idea that, and our guests so far have spoken openly and honestly about it, that living in a life isn't working for you, that you can pick yourself up and you can do a U-turn and go and find one that does. It's not always about surviving, it's about choosing truer life. Well, my guest today is Quinten Sheriff, and he knows that choice himself. He knows it intimately. He grew up in Zimbabwe in a conservative Christian family, but he decided that life was not for him. It didn't gel with his own beliefs, and he faced that stark choice. Hiding who he was and staying at home, or living authentically. And Quinten chose that option, and that meant leaving his home. And his journey has taken him all around the world. He's lived across 6 countries, from Africa to Asia to Latin America. Now he's living in Montreal. He co-hosts the podcast, The Connectors, which spotlights how people can connect. And I think that's such a big part of rebirth, of finding a new place, a new direction. And so it's a great pleasure to have him join me today. And I guess we will be discussing all these points in the next few moments. Quinten, great to have you.
Benjamin, thank you so much for the invite. And wow, what an introduction. That's it actually got me a bit emotional, just realizing, when someone else shines the mirror to the content that you're putting out there and you feel like you're putting out a certain messaging, and then they see something that's so authentic and so behind the scenes and a big driver and a big, I guess, energizer for my life. So thank you for that. Like this feeling of being pushed to a new chapter and a new direction and a new destination. Thank you.
I wonder how many people in the world want that new direction. How many people listening want to change something? They're not in a position where they can, but I think many people don't have the courage to stand up and do it. And maybe that's it. I think every single one of us wants to change some things, but it can be so difficult to do it. So I suppose I've jumped ahead already. I want to ask about your own experience, but where does that kind of courage come from? Like in your story, where did that ability to do that come from?
Oof. I mean, like, as you were saying in the summary right at the beginning, I literally left when I was 19. I felt like I didn't have a choice at that point. I could either stay in Zimbabwe and stay with a very conservative upbringing and a conservative culture and stay where it's illegal for me just to be myself as a gay person in Zimbabwe. Like, we can be thrown in prison for 5 years without even going through a legal construct, like going to courts and stuff. So as I was a teenager and I was realizing, I'm a bit different to the people around me. Oh, wow, the messaging that I'm getting is that you're, all of the usual homophobic stuff. You're evil, you're nasty, God doesn't approve of you, so we don't approve of you. This was the messaging that I had from my family. My mom put me through conversion therapy for 2 years, which just mentally drove me a little bit nuts. And so I was at this point where I'd been forced into conversion therapy, and I just knew, hey, if you carry on down this line, you're not going to survive by the age of 25. You'll either end it yourself because of all of these pressures around you, or you've got to get out. So it was like the frog in the frying pan. You've just got to make that jump and trust that you're going to land somewhere.
The fear of leaving behind where you were born, your family, but hope that where you were going was going to give you, what you were looking for.
Absolutely. And, I hope in the future and possibilities that could come, hope in the fact that I knew that there were people out there that are like me, that I could go and find my tribe. I could go into other countries that are more open-minded, and that and hope that I can do something myself. I can build it myself as I'm going along. And I guess I was lucky because like the story of white people in Africa is the story of migration. You know, my grandfather came to, well, it was Rhodesia at the time, like after the Second World War, from London. And on my mom's side, that's on my mom's side. And on my dad's side, they came from Germany and Holland. So like in my culture and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, we're migrating. So I'm just doing this for the next generation. Yes, it's scary leaving my home country, but my ancestors did it before me. And I can also be the like brave explorer.
What were you, describe sort of briefly what life was like in Zimbabwe growing up, and specifically, what was it that you wanted to leave? What was it that just didn't work, you know, with your life?
Yeah. I mean, if you can imagine, every Sunday was like at least one church service, if not two. There was church stuff going on a Tuesday. There was church stuff going on a Thursday. There was youth group on a Friday. My father was a preacher and my mom was his very proud conservative wife. And they felt like their standing in society was definitely put them on a pedestal because of their leadership positions in the church and all that. So there was this pressure at home about being the good kid, being the preacher's kid, and pressure outside about always being, you know, the nice young man who's been brought up properly. And yeah, I'm a nice young man, but it was also a complete lie, you know, all of this like standing up and being the puppet for the family, or and then that was just the family side, you know. I'd then go to, like, I remember going and watching a movie with some friends, you know, on a Saturday night or something. And just because I wore a shirt that had a Chinese collar, like a Mandarin collar, I was beaten up after going to the movie, almost bad enough to be hospitalized just because I didn't dress like everyone around me. And that's never changed. Like every single time I've gone back to Zimbabwe, I take out different clothes from my cupboard and I have to present myself completely differently. So it wasn't like, and that was just general society, just a bunch of people like seeing me in the cinema and just deciding that, oh, well, this, you know, marginalized person can be picked upon because there's no retribution coming.
It's, I suppose so many people would think that a life, particularly people sort of who, you know, who listen to this podcast, come from sort of, you know, a religious background in America, would say that a religious life like that, where you had church every Sunday and you had prayers, was the most positive thing that one could grow up in. And I just think that it's one of the biggest problems, the idea that may work perfectly for many people, but they need to understand that it doesn't have to work for everybody. And maybe that's what it isn't, the ability to say, look, we think that this is the best way of living and will work for us, but it doesn't work for Quinten. So rather than forcing him to do it, say you can live how you like. And so maybe that's the divide. Maybe that's where it goes wrong. Everyone can live however they want. They should be able to live how they want. But it's when you try and force other people to live in your way, maybe that's where the problem lies.
100%. You know, it's, I see that as the philosophical difference from the words that are in these religious books, like the Bible, that say, treat your neighbor as you treat yourself, and be kind to the people around you, and don't forget the marginalized. Look after the widows and the kids and the poor people. And then there's the actual reality that when you get people who are living in communities and they're only seeing the same sort of people around them reflected. So like if we would go to church and we would see a lot of white people who would be in families and there would be one or two kids running around. But we didn't go and see to a black people's church, for example, and see another way. And I think it's that by mixing and rubbing shoulders with people around you, that you get to see, hey, this person is flourishing, they're enjoying their life, they're being everything that they can be and that they want to be. And actually, they're good. They're equally aligned to my philosophy and the way I want to live my life, even if they don't come under that umbrella of Christianity or Buddhist or Muslim or whatever.
We'll be back in a moment with Searching for Heroes.
Was there a moment that you said, that's it, I've got to go? Or did it grow over a few years? Like, when was the moment you said, I'm packing my bags, I'm off? And how quickly did that happen?
I could feel the pressure building. Like, once I'd gone through sort of a year of this conversion therapy every Thursday afternoon, 3:30, going to this Christian counseling center and having to talk about my thoughts and my feelings and having everything judged all the time, and this being told to my family, I could feel after a year, oh, okay, I need to get out. Secretly, I'd been started dating this person, this man, and he was moving down to Johannesburg, to South Africa, and he was moving his offices. And I didn't tell my family, but somehow my mom figured out that, you know, the end of the year was coming and that something was going to happen. So she actually stole my passport and hid it from me. And I realized this after like a week or two, because I was making plans and like giving my partner clothes and things to store so that if I left, I'd have stuff. And it took me about 6 weeks of searching the house, like waiting for my mom to leave and then going room by room and going through all the cupboards and looking behind the picture frames and everything. And I finally found my passport hidden in the attic. And that was like the moment I said to my partner, hey, we need to get out of here in like the next 2 weeks or sooner if possible. And he was sort of moving back and forth from South Africa. So I knew that transport was a possibility coming up. And he just said, okay, that's fine. And we'll get your suitcases and we're getting out of there. And literally in a week, I was like getting out of my home at 4:30 or 5 in the morning. And my mom woke up and switched on all the lights. And we had this big screaming match in the garden. And I had to literally run out and jump in the car and escape. It was crazy.
What's your relationship like now with your parents?
I don't speak with my father. My parents divorced and he disappeared and just didn't communicate at all. And with my mom, it's very low contact. She's very adamant about her Christianity, and she's very adamant about what she perceives as my future. Whilst I know that she loves me, I don't think that we have a very positive relationship, because every single time that I email her or something, I'm often getting something judgmental or Christian coming back. And that means that I have to put boundaries in place and say, look, if you do that 2 more times, then I'm going to block you. And unfortunately, I've had to block my mom on a bunch of different social media because she won't stop. Yeah, I'm sorry about it as well. But that's life, hey?
And I want in a moment to talk about the next chapter and how you have to rebuild after that. But I suppose one more question about that is, you must have been torn, because you must have known that your parents felt they were doing the best thing for you in their eyes as a pastor and Christian. They thought they were helping, like that's what they were doing. And yet you totally, so did you understand that that's their beliefs and that's why or do you think, no, they're just not listening to me? Was that a very twisted decision?
Yeah, I feel like, maybe to explain it a bit more, my grandfather was in the army and he was in the police. And, if you can imagine someone, I don't know if you've watched the musical, The Sound of Music, but there's the scene with the army father coming in and whistling and all the kids running downstairs and lining up and very regimented. That was my granddad, So I feel like my mom took some of that regimented control and and this is how we raise a kid. And if they're outside of this, it means that they're not doing their job as a kid and I'm not doing my job as a parent. So I definitely saw their perspective. But at the same time, I was like, we grew up in a city. I had friends who were Indian, who were Hindu, and, Muslim people and all that. And they would come round and have lunch, and my mom would, have friends who, like, one of her closest friends was a Hindu lady. So on one hand, it was like, why are you not seeing the reality that is right in front of you? That you are friends with different people, but you can't allow your own children to be different people. That was a big struggle. Yeah.
I suppose in The Sound of Music, the father eventually learns to give his children that freedom and to sing and dance with them. So, and that's one story where he learned and he adapted and turned. I suppose maybe you were hoping that your parents might as well, but they didn't. What was it like that day you left and you were both, I don't know how you felt about what you were leaving, but were you eyes all ahead about what lies ahead? How am I going to build it? Who am I going to meet? Where am I going to go? What were the questions when you started a new life?
Oh my God, so many questions. I had been to South Africa a couple of times on holiday, with my family. So it wasn't completely new, but, it's like different culture, different government, different language. I was in between my bachelor's, so I had to transfer everything. So I was like, how do I transfer to another school? How do I pay for things in a different foreign currency? I'm a student. Can I get a bank account and a credit card? Am I going to make...
What about money? How were you going to afford food or a place to live?
I had to depend on my partner, and he paid for everything for the first year. And I paid it back by being an editor and creating content, because he had 5 computer magazines, and they were like for Middle East and Africa. So there was work to do, and I could give him my time and write and do that sort of stuff. So that's how we figured it out. It was sort of like a barter system, but without Mark, my first boyfriend, I would not have survived. Literally would not have had the options. I didn't have the money. I was like this 18 or 19-year-old, like leaving home, not just home, but like a different country. But at the same time, huge excitement. And as you're talking about the theme, like rebirth, I'm going to a country where it's one of the first countries in the world that put the constitution, put gay marriage into the constitution and gave us rights, equal rights to anyone else, and up to the point of marriage. So I was like, oh my God, it's going to be cool. I'm this young man going off to another big city, and I'm also going to have some really fun times. I hope I get to find some community. I hope I get to find some people that are like me and that we become friends. So fear, but hope at the same time, and excitement.
And I suppose that's, Mark helped you get through it, and he was there. And I suppose that, you must always be looking for people around you who might need help getting out of whatever they're doing, because going through something alone, something so difficult alone, can be almost impossible. But having one person there who you can bounce ideas off, who you can talk to, and look, this is what you do now. Your podcast is about making connections. That's something that I think is probably the most essential thing, is having one person, someone that you can turn to and trust and who can help you. And those are the connections I suppose you were looking for.
Absolutely. Honestly, the podcast has shown me so many different ways that we can connect, and the importance of our relationships around us. There's that saying of, if you've got 5 good friends around you, anything is possible, and it's so true. That close group of friends, you don't need a lot of them, but you do need them. You need those 3 people that you can send a text to and say, hey, I'm feeling down. I need a hug this weekend. Can we go for a coffee and a walk? Or I've got this problem and I'm trying to solve it.
Yeah.
And yeah, you're right. I do a lot of work in nonprofits and I do a lot of volunteer time because I want the people around me to have the supports that I can now offer, couldn't offer it when I was 19 or 20, but now I can offer these supports.
Okay. So if you were offering support, let's say someone is listening and they want to turn around. They want to do a U-turn. They want to get off, stop the lifestyle they currently have or whatever change they want. Okay, there are a couple of things you would say to them to either find that courage, either to make that move, either to reach out to someone. Like someone's sitting there. What should they do? How can they make a change if they feel it's needed?
I would say two things are very important. You can do it yourself and you are more than enough. You can do this. It's been done before in harder circumstances. My story has been done in way harder circumstances than what I went through. So even though it was hard for me, I knew that somewhere, somehow people had walked that path already. And then the second thing I would say is good enough. So don't feel like you need to go out there and in 5 years in a new country be having a car and putting a down payment on a house and marrying and getting citizenship. Figure out how to get to that new place. Figure out how to put a roof over your head and some food in the fridge. And boy, you are doing amazingly. Don't worry too much about what other people imagine about you or expect of you, we have this idea in Africa of anyone that leaves and goes to North America or Europe is suddenly, living the good life and living the rich life. And it is not that way at all. We come in and we do a lot of service work and we do a lot of difficult jobs. And that's kind of the immigrant journey and the immigrant story. So I'd say those two things.
And you sort of became an immigrant in a sense to many different places. So why were you bouncing around to so many different places? Were you looking for one final thing or do you just want to experience different things?
I was looking for one final thing. I recognized that I was this white guy traveling on a Zimbabwean passport and I tried already to live in Europe and got turned down in many countries because of the passport, because they would, EU laws say you got to take someone from Europe before you take someone from outside of Europe. So fine, I understood that, But at the same time, there was a lot of inequality. I would see the ministers and the president of my country traveling around without any worries. But then I'm turned down for visas to the US and Australia and New Zealand and Argentina. So yeah, I did have these amazing experiences living in these different places, but it was my work as a teacher in international schools that was I just kept having to find the next job because I was in exile. I knew I couldn't go back home to Zimbabwe. That was not a choice. And I hadn't figured out where to stay. If Thailand allowed people to become citizens, I worked in northern Thailand for 3 years. I would be in Thailand now. I would not be in Canada. Full disclosure, love Thailand.
Was you up in Chiang Mai or somewhere like that?
I was up in Chiang Mai, yeah, exactly. Such a beautiful place.
Yeah, I know.
Oh my God. So yeah, it was this big journey of country by country by country where, sure, I had a great time there and I had 12 weeks of travel because I was a teacher and all that. But I was still trying to figure out, hey, where can I be where I can just be myself and my papers are okay and I'll never be pulled out of immigration line or an airport line for an hour and a half questioning just because I've got some odd credentials on my passport.
We'll be back in a moment with Searching for Heroes.
Talk about finding connections wherever you go. How different was that? Say, what are the people in Thailand like in terms of making connections and being open versus the people sort of in South Africa or the people in Canada? Did you notice that it was different based on society, or is there an underlying theme that brings people together no matter where in the world you are?
I would say both at the same time. There is an underlying humanity where like, how can I say it? If we see a young kid running around and they fall over and they graze their shins, we want to go and pick that little kid up and tell them it's all going to be okay. And in the same way that humanity answers calls, if you're hungry, someone hopefully will be generous enough to feed you. If you need help getting from one place to another, there is this humanity where if you are brave enough to ask, then often what you ask for will be answered, because we're humans. We feel good about helping other people, and we've been in those situations. And then, like, as a technique for like actually getting your community, I would say get some hobbies, because that was the easiest way for me, like arriving in a new country with my 2 suitcases and figuring out, oh, wow, okay, I start school on 2 Mondays time, and I'm going to be packed teaching 40, 50 hours a week. Let me figure out some cool social stuff. So I love hiking. I like outdoors. I like nature. I like gardening. I like dancing. I like cooking. So places like Peru and Thailand are fantastic for that. You can do like awesome dancing on the weekend in Latin America. You can for quite cheap, you can get some cool dance classes, and immediately every Thursday night you're seeing the same people and hanging out with them and maybe grabbing a beer or a bite to eat afterwards. Or you're going for a hike on, once a month on a Saturday. And suddenly after 6 months, these are people who are calling you up for dinner or going for a coffee or sending you their child to tutor or teach violin or whatever.
Do you think, I can't help but look at the world at the moment and think that there are more divisions, more cracks, where sides feel to be pulling apart? Like, do you think that? Do you think that we are living, because I know your podcast, you talk often about the things that bring people together, the connections, but do you also fear that in many places the opposite is happening and that those connections are being broken down, and why, if you think so?
I definitely see that happening. I mean, you only need to spend 10 minutes on any social media to see 2 totally different viewpoints, both emotional, both trying to engage you and pull you in their direction. And it's tough. So yeah, it's definitely happening. And yeah, it's definitely a problem. And I think at the root of it is not enough regulations on what people are allowed to say or do or conduct themselves publicly. And I don't know how to manage that, because I'm from the educational sphere. So I see things like mobile phones and social media with young people really damaging young people's mental health and their well-being, and creating anxious young people who don't know their way who don't see themselves in society or figure out this new way of being. So that's like the young people, but I could also equally see it like with my grandfather, constantly watching news that was just talking about immigrants coming on boats. And I don't know how to kindly tell people that they need to educate themselves a little more about how media can motivate you in different directions, or can pull your decisions in a certain direction that's not yours. It's just because you've watched that message a dozen times that you feel like that's the way to go. I don't know.
I think, personally, I would say that you have to, whether it's once a week, go and pick up the newspaper that is writing from a different opinion to yours. Just spend half an hour just so you understand, just so you're reading what other people are thinking. The most dangerous thing, and like, everyone is entitled to their own beliefs, so that's fine. You can have whatever beliefs you want. Just make sure that you understand other people's beliefs. Make sure you spend time reading what other people think. And I think, I suppose it's easy to say algorithms and tech are designed to stop you doing that. And it's interesting, isn't it, whether or not there should be some kind of intervention, some way of saying, make sure that people are getting different views.
It's really tough because you're a journalist. So like your job is all about viewing things and creating as real a depiction of what you're seeing from your vantage point. So yeah, I wondered how you would react to that because like I was in education, so we have to regulate and we have to put guardrails around information for people at a certain age, etc. But once we're adults, it's like this free-for-all circus where suddenly you're supposed to just manage all of this yourselves.
I suppose maybe your podcast is your sort of partly your involvement in that, your attempt to make connections, remind people to come together, to talk together. Is that what the podcast is sort of focused on, and what is the main sort of goal of it?
Right, absolutely. So our headline is all about making deep and meaningful personal connections can enrich not only your personal life, but your work life. And so, sure, in our personal life, like when we've spoken with guests who are like coaches or entrepreneurs, it's very much about their connection to their passions or their networking. But then when it's like talking about work life, we have a lot of people who come and guest on the show and they talk about the different generations in the work, in work, for example, and how we have to manage these relationships and how you can manage these. So it's very much the two perspectives of like personal enrichment and work enrichment, and how do relationships and networking get you where you want to be.
I suppose just to finish up, if you were going to send a message to people listening, and let's say we are looking at our own current theme of rebirth, like what is your one message to will them on, to lift them up, to say, don't be afraid, or go get it, like, or to address any other sort of big concerns in life? Like, what would you like people to hear?
I'm going to tell a little story. So when I was going through this difficult time in Zimbabwe, there was one older guy that I knew was gay, and I would chat to him, and he told me, Quinten, don't worry. Right now you're an ugly caterpillar, but one day you're going to change. You're going to go into your chrysalis. The change is going to be uncomfortable. And you're going to feel like sometimes you're breaking things off in order to rebuild something new. But trust the process, go through those days and those weeks and those months. And before you know it, you're going to pop out of your chrysalis and you're going to be this beautiful butterfly. And I've always remembered that little story because it's kind of funny, him insulting me and calling me this ugly caterpillar at the beginning. And then just telling me it's okay, you've got to go through that in order to make the changes. So like as rebirth, it's not comfortable. Any story that involves rebirth is not a comfortable story. And it involves a squishing and a twisting and a folding and then this new expansion. So don't worry if you're feeling pressured and squeezed and twisted, because soon is going to be this feeling of growth and this feeling of expansion and taking up your space and the space that you should be taking up.
And even if you've got anxiety, even if you don't trust yourself, know that deep inside yourself, there is something beautiful. There's something good. And, I think throughout life, particularly when you're younger, you ask yourself so many questions. Am I doing it in the right way? Is this the way I should? Am I doing? But I suppose that's the perfect thing to say, is that if you work hard, if you commit to it, and you go out and you do it, there is something great and positive inside everybody. Everybody.
Absolutely. Every single person out there.
Quinten, thank you so much for joining me today. I greatly appreciate it. And I would encourage everyone to go and listen to your podcast as well, Connectors. It's really fascinating people and often some really deep and interesting conversations. So thank you for being on my podcast today.
Benjamin, thank you so much for giving me this time and for such enriching questions. You really made me think. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Quinten.
Have a great day.
Yeah, you too. Well, that was Quinten Sheriff. And as ever, I'm so pleased that he was able to join the podcast today. Nick, I think that with the theme of the moment of rebirth, that was a story that was both thoughtful, and I think he was brutally honest as well. Like, the hard parts are real. growing up where being himself, where being gay was illegal, 2 years of conversion therapy, a family faith that he respected, but that couldn't make space for him. And I know many of our listeners also will be thinking that Christianity and that sort of those views should be the very center of life. But I think, it's important to realize that for some people, they feel differently. And certainly Quinten's parents, for all of their faith, seem to be unable to accept the life that Quinten felt he wanted to live. The stolen passport hidden in the attic, the pre-dawn escape, and then look, sort of the immigrant life as a result, new countries, new papers, tighter budgets. That was a huge rebirth, a life change for Quinten to try and find the life he wanted to live. And I do think that although we talk about all those difficult parts, there is an inspiring thread that runs right through his story. It's a 19-year-old who wanted to choose his authenticity over fear. He found hope strong enough that he could cross borders. There was the kindness that he talked about of one person, Mark, who helped him to do it. And then there's a decision that Quinten has taken ever since to almost pay that forward through service, through education, and his podcast, which is a show that aims to build bridges. And I loved his 2 pieces of advice. I think they work for absolutely anyone going through anything difficult. And that is, you can do it yourself. You are enough. Don't doubt yourself. You're enough. And his other one, good is good enough. As he said, look, many people, you got a roof over your head, you've got food in the fridge, you've got friends. That's a win. For some people, that is a great win. And from there, connection continues to grow. And he said, pick a hobby if you're somewhere new. Go find your people like you. And if you're struggling, just text 3 friends. Even text 1 friend and just say, look, I need to meet up, I need to chat. That helps. Again, no matter what you're going through, those things help. And we hear that often in this podcast. And then there's that last metaphor he talked about, which is, for him, his rebirth was like a chrysalis, turning caterpillar into a butterfly. It can be awkward life, it can be painful life. But, eventually you can stretch your wings, you can fly. And I like that. I feel that I went through something similar myself when things were pretty bad after Ukraine, There's something positive inside everyone. And if you work hard, you can get there. If you reach out to people, you can get there. So look, if you're listening today and you think that life is not going in the right way, well, look, doesn't mean that it's the end and it's not going to move. Perhaps that's the beginning for you. This is the moment that you lift yourself up and you realize that change has to happen. I hope you enjoyed the podcast today. I hope that you respected what Quinten said and his ability to get up and turn life around when the life that he was in wasn't working for him. And so thank you, Quinten, for your candor. And please go check out his podcast. It's called The Connectors, where he has conversations with people about how relationships, whether it is in business or whether it is personal, how those can change our lives. So again, thank you for joining me. I'm Benjamin Hall, and this is Searching for Heroes. And I guess if it helped you, if you enjoyed listening to this or any of the other podcasts, go out and share it with someone else. And remember, with our theme at the moment of rebirth, remember that you are allowed to go out and you are allowed to go and choose a truer life. There is nothing stopping you.
Thanks for listening to Searching for Heroes. Listen ad-free with a Fox News Podcasts Plus subscription on Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Prime members can listen to this show ad-free on the Amazon Music app.